Hey, what's up everybody, Malakith here, and some exciting news for you. If you haven't already seen the videos, which I'm sure are definitely about by now, the new Total War game is called Total War Attila. Now, to be very clear, this is not an expansion for Rome, it's not an add-on, it is a standalone game and comes with a whole host of extra features. So, going to go through the basic features to begin with, and then towards the end I'm going to sort of comment on the experiences I had when I was recently at Creative Assembly, taking a look at this, getting to play with it a little bit, and all that sort of stuff. But we'll get this sort of the feature list out of the way first. So it's based at its core on the Rome 2 engine, so things like the way you construct armies and just the general feel of the game is very much Rome 2. It's not falling back to any of the older systems where you could create armies without generals and all of those sorts of things. So at its very core, its essence, it's based around the Rome 2 engine, if you like. It does, however, come with some improved graphical qualities and shaders, which hopefully you can see in the picture in the background, which should be scrolling around the world map for you. It's based around, obviously, Attila's Hun invasion of the sort of the old world. Now, at the time, I asked the question, is Attila going to be a playable faction? And I got a resounding, we're not going to tell you, which you could interpret a number of ways. This is in alpha, it is code incomplete, and they are still doing a lot of features that they did not reveal. So it's all speculation on a lot of stuff. You may end up seeing a campaign akin to Napoleon, where you play as Attila. You may not get to play as Attila at all, and he's just the big bad guy that's sort of coming to conquer you, and you should all be worried and wetting yourself, waiting for his hordes to descend on your puny little kingdom. We don't know yet. They haven't really sort of given us the information. Some things that people will like returning to the series: family trees are back in. There's a lot more emphasis being put on the way that your actual characters, they are designed to live longer than the ones in Rome 2 do, so that they can gather more traits, you can become more attached to them, you can sort of develop them, so you end up with a better character. Equally, if they're left sitting around doing nothing in a town, they'll develop negative traits, so apparently you want to keep your generals active and doing useful things rather than just having one sat in a navy in the middle of nowhere for the entire game. Building on the sort of, in Rome 2 you've got the collection of sort of towns and cities that make up a province, and then you can issue an edict once you own all of them. That is being changed slightly. You no longer have to own all of them within the province to issue an edict, but you do have to assign one of the general style characters to be a provincial governor, and his stats and traits will come into how he governs that. So that adds a nice little development to the thing, and it means you aren't quite so focused on, I have to take that territory to get the province so I can issue an edict, which is nice from my perspective. I think that's a good change. Other than that, after that we get on to sort of the big features that this is meant to be bringing into the game. Now, I'm afraid I'm working with stock footage that I've been given. I couldn't take footage of my own at the time, so a lot of this I can't show you, but the sort of the core premise of this is that you're descending into effectively sort of the Dark Ages, I guess. Europe's getting colder, it's becoming more hostile. At the beginning of the game, the northern regions are suffering from, I'll call it a mini ice age. Reduced temperatures, crops aren't yielding as much. That apparently is going to creep steadily southwards as your game progresses, making the northern reach sort of territories less and less useful to you, sort of forcing you to fight over the more beneficial southern territories. And it's going to make your empire more and more difficult to manage as certain bits become sort of a lot more difficult to maintain because there's just not the sort of resources there to keep them there anymore. They're also doing sort of, it's food versus squalor, I believe it was. You sort of have to balance the two in a town as opposed to, as well as the happiness. They kind of touched on that, but they didn't really go into too much detail and didn't show us it amazingly. So we'll just have to see how that develops. Another key feature that they have introduced, though, is the ability to completely raise an entire province. If you own the province and you've got a turn where nothing is sieging the province, you can completely flatten the entire thing. You level the city, it goes to a complete just rubble-strewn thing that can be refounded by someone else at extreme cost. But you also salt and burn the earth and make it far less productive for whoever comes back to take it over. So it's a pretty drastic thing to be doing. It's a scorched earth policy, basically, which could be good if you're trying to hold people back and sort of make it less of an incentive for them to attack across into you. You set up a scorched earth border. I don't know. Equally, you could go raid someone else's prized province that they've left undefended and torch the hell out of it if you can stay there long enough before someone comes to interrupt you. So that's a nice feature, but I can think of a lot of ways it could potentially be abused. So I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't balanced or changed at some point. You also have the Huns themselves, obviously. From what I could gather, they're not present at the beginning of the game, and then they probably appear and then descend as a huge horde from the side of the map. But like I said earlier, they were a bit cagey on revealing that bit. So that's it for the campaign map stuff. Battles. Just in general, they want to change the way that battles occur so they're a bit slower. They don't obviously want to make them so that you're there for an hour and a half playing, but especially with certain units, they feel that the way Rome 2 was playing, the battles ended a bit quickly. You know, units chewed through other units a bit too fast, so they're trying to generally slow the battle down a bit. Also, when a unit breaks, it will flee like it currently does, but there's a much more increased chance that it will rally and come back again, as opposed to just exiting the field, which is pretty much what they always ever do in Rome 2. So they want it to be a much more sort of fluid dynamic. You've got to keep an eye on things, because just because you've broken that unit doesn't mean it's not going to come back and be in your flank. What else was there? There was a lot to do with sieges. Sieges have changed a big amount. Kind of a campaign battle crossover. The way that the actual siege occurs now, the longer you siege on the campaign map, the more devastated the actual siege battle is. So they're designed to take a lot longer than they currently do in Rome 2, lasting several seasons to even get a minor amount of damage on the fort. But as you progress your siege, the fort itself becomes more and more deteriorated. The buildings inside start to become sort of destroyed. Eventually the walls start to sort of crumble in places where it's been under siege for so long and will have been attacked and mined and sapped and all those sorts of things that happen in prolonged siege warfare. So the longer you can siege it for, the more just damage is already there before you go into fight. So if you don't have siege engines with you, if you prolong it long enough, there will still be a huge gap in the wall. I'll cover that a bit better later, because the battle I played was a siege battle. Fire now spreads within the city, so if you can get fire onagers lobbing rocks in there, set a building on fire, that building will burn. It will then spread to the building next to it and spread to just anything it's touching, including units that happen to be next door, damaging them. And I unfortunately experienced that firsthand. So if you can get your siege weapons up to start lobbing fire projectiles in, you can do some serious damage to them. The morale of the units defending the city is also tied to how the city is structurally. If the whole place is on fire, burning down, and there's nothing left worth defending, the morale of the defenders is not going to be particularly high. So that's an incentive. If you're not overly bothered about preserving the city for when you've captured it, you can get a much easier win by just destroying the entire place, basically. The other big sort of point, they've added in barricades. Now, these aren't barricades like you see in the current field battles where you've just got sort of the little wall of things that you drag out and go, oh, I want it here. These go down in predefined points on the map. There should be a picture in the background where near the foreground you can see it's like a wall, like a raised section with a sort of plank wall on the front, and then all the guys are sort of stood up behind that. You can set those up in key locations around the city. And the battle I played was Colchester, and it seemed that the maps were designed to be a lot more street orientated. So you put these barricades in the specific streets you want to defend. The attacker can come up and force attack the barricade to destroy it to then get through. Equally, if you find you're blocked in by your own barricade because you didn't place it very well and you haven't really thought about your retreat as you're getting attacked, you may have to destroy your own barricade. But that is entirely possible. Generally, I found putting crossbows on it was the most effective. They just sort of sit behind it, fire over it. It gives them some protection. One thing I did notice about the siege, so talking about the battle I played now, so I was playing the Battle of Colchester. I was defending as a Roman army against, I believe it was Saxons, and it was stacked so that the Saxons should win. To be honest, it was designed to be an extremely difficult fight to let you try and utilise those barricades to their full effect and just see the mechanics of the city burning, and it was difficult. The barricades I found were useful as long as you pre-planned your defence. And for this defence, if you imagine in a Rome 2 siege you smash down a bit of wall, if we call that one section of wall where you've destroyed a block, there were about 8 blocks of wall missing, like they all crumbled in just because of how long the siege had been going on. So they had a very wide front to attack up, so there was really no point trying to hold the walls. So, but the map had been designed in such a way that you could hold the sort of the first sets of streets they came to and then progressively get pushed back and pull them into sort of courtyard type areas, little marketplaces, and then charge them from multiple sides. The map just seemed a lot better designed than the Rome 2 maps for that kind of fighting. I hope that carries on through all of the cities and isn't just a feature of Colchester. It would be a lot better to see sort of defense in depth as opposed to hold the walls, oh crap, we lost the walls, oh well, it's over. Or the AIs, let's go sit on the capture point because we're not going to defend anywhere else. It seemed a lot better designed. Hopefully that carries through into the rest of the game. The fire damage was very impressive. One thing I didn't account for was it'll spread to buildings, then spread to the barricade between the buildings, burn all of your troops on it, and then spread to the other set of buildings, the other side of the barricade. I lost rather a lot of crossbowmen in my first playthrough to that, sadly. But it was awesome to see, so I can't complain too much. The much slower combat, it's very nice. It means you commit a unit and they will sit there and slug it out. I mean, it was the sort of legionaries versus, or the equivalent of legionaries for the period, versus sort of Saxon, I think they were Hearth Guard, which are pretty nasty. And they were there sort of 5+ minutes, chugging away, bashing each other over the head. It wasn't until I managed to bring another unit round and charge them in the rear that they really sort of ran off. But then just before exiting the city, they rallied and came back again. And although it's annoying, it's nice at the same time. It means you don't just break one unit and then suddenly you've got this unit advantage and just roll up the battlefield, which I find happens in Rome 2. So it just feels like they've polished the combat system a bit. I mean, obviously this is still alpha and they've got a lot more work to do. Who knows what they will do with that time. But it just felt, from playing it, like it was a much more polished version of Rome 2's combat system. In terms of setting, I wasn't amazingly sold. It kind of sort of looked like Rome 2 with improvements. But at the same time, they haven't revealed a lot of the features, so I'm going to reserve judgment. I probably would have liked personally for it to be another era, just because it's very similar to Rome 2 in its setting. It's for me, it's just not quite different enough. I would have liked another setting game in between this coming out and that, and Rome 2 really. But I can see from a business perspective why they would keep it similar, because it lets them reuse a lot of the assets and the balancing and all of the features and feedback they've gained from Rome 2 and feed that into this new game. And they've definitely been taking on a lot of feedback. There are a lot of comments coming in from all of the guys there representing the community, and a lot of them they'd already heard. So they'd obviously been listening, which is good to see. I honestly can't think of anything else to say now. I'm sorry you've probably seen the same footage over and over again. I had limited stuff to work with. As I said, I couldn't record my own. Feel free to put some comments down in the bottom of the video once you've finished watching this. At the time this releases, I will be at their official press release at Eurogamer, so I won't be able to respond straight away, but I may be more well informed by the time I get back to answer them. So hopefully everyone is excited. I have no idea when it's coming out. They didn't even mention that. And I expect there will be lots more updates in the future. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.